Welcome to the Ready Room Podcast. I am your host, Josh, the friendly neighborhood gunsmith of the podcast. And today we're going to be talking about what to look for in an AR-15. Hope you guys enjoy. All right, guys. So welcome back. This is we're still on a 2-week schedule right now. Every 2 weeks, we're trying to release an episode as best we can. It is really tough, like I've said before, and I don't mean to chirp on that. We have been quite busy here in this household. 2 jobs, a new baby, a lot going on. But it's been very good, very good, very blessed here. And what's interesting is today before today, I was planning this episode out, and I thought, this would be a pretty simple topic that will cover some stuff people want to know about, but will give me an easy episode. And then as I was typing out the outline, I couldn't stop. I just couldn't stop typing. So today might be a little more in detail than I anticipated originally, but I just couldn't stop. I couldn't stop myself. So you're getting a bit of an in-depth episode on what to look for in a quality AR-15 today. But first, if you guys want to find us on social media, you can find TBR Gunworks on Instagram, Facebook, or tbrgunworks.com. If you want to help support the podcast, the best way you can do that is to leave us an honest review on whatever podcast site you're using. It doesn't always have to be this, super positive review. If you have some notes, we're more than willing to hear you out. And we appreciate honesty. Trolling is a different story. And subscribe on YouTube. If you ever catching these episodes on YouTube, I do record a video of me recording. It's just a webcam right now that it's only me as opposed to me and my wife. Whenever we have in-person guests, we will be doing the bigger video. Really, excited for Mark Novak, who will eventually be coming up whenever he gets a chance. He's a very busy man. So yeah, subscribe on YouTube. Going to grow that channel up. So the topic is, what to look for in AR-15. And the reason we're talking about this is because I often get asked what I look for in an AR-15, or what brands make the best parts. What parts would I buy if I were building a new AR, etc. And a lot of times these are new gun owners. We know in 2020 and 2019 we had skyrocketing gun ownership, a lot of first-time gun buyers. And I've met a couple people who were just like, man, I just want to buy one AR, but the market's so flooded, I don't know what to buy. I don't know what's good. And a lot of times if they'll ask somebody who knows a good bit, the problem is that person will just give them their bias. We'll just say, well, I like Daniel Defense, so you should buy Daniel Defense. Well, that's not... it's not an absolute. We're not Sith here. We don't only deal in absolutes. Some of y'all are going to hate that reference. But the problem with questions like those is that they're a little too general, because much like the car market, the AR market is absolutely insane and as broad as it has ever been. If not, this is the biggest the market's ever been, and it gets bigger every day. So I'd like to approach the topic as if I were talking to someone who wanted to buy one AR-15 and wanted it to last them quite a while, and not focusing on any particular role, but more focused on quality and reliability. And so not only are we going to be talking about this from the perspective of a buyer, but we're also going to be talking about this from a perspective of a would-be builder, because I know a lot of you would like to build your own ARs rather than purchase. And a lot of these topics will translate to both building and buying, right? So it's going to be a little in-depth, but I would also like to note that some of the things we're talking about today will not translate to AR-10s in the same way, because unlike the AR-15 market, which has generally standardized specifications and tolerances, barring proprietary products, the AR-10 market is not the same. So if you're going to build an AR-10, I urge you to do an extraordinary amount of research before purchasing parts and components. to make sure that they all work together, okay? Because I can't tell you how many people I've met who have had severe issues trying to build an AR-10. Buying is one thing with an AR-10, but building is a whole other beast with AR-10s compared to AR-15s. That was a nice little notification. Thank you for that. All right, first group of things we're going to talk about is what I call the heart of the AR-15. I'm sure plenty of other people call it that too. But some people may argue this point because I would say there are actually two hearts of the AR-15 instead of one. Some say it is just the bolt carrier group, and all the components involved in the bolt carrier group, your bolt, your firing pin, your gas key, etc. So the bolt carrier group, some people would call the heart of the AR-15. But I would argue that it is actually the bolt carrier group and the barrel in combination with each other. If your bolt carrier group and your barrel are not working in harmony with one another, then you're going to have some serious issues. Not to mention the problems that could arise from issues with your gas port on your barrel, right? Or in your barrel. So what would I look for in good quality bolt carrier groups and good quality barrels? Well, let's start out with bolt carrier groups. Okay, we're going to move from the bolt carrier group to the barrel. I would start out with quality steel. Okay, a lot of common steel you'll see is 9310, 8620, or my favorite, Carpenter 158. Carpenter 158 steel is the only steel that I will currently, and from here on out, buy when it comes to bolt carrier groups. Now, that's the body. That's the actual carrier itself. The bolt carrier is, when you find them made out of Carpenter 158, that's my favorite. Now, your gas key and your bolt may not be made out of the same material. In fact, they most likely are not made out of the same material as the carrier. Okay, the bolt itself has to take a lot different stress and high pressures. So typically Carpenter 158 is not used on the bolt itself, okay? But you're looking for good quality steel. And as a machinist, I know and trust the qualities of Carpenter 158 steel. And I know I can trust that carrier to handle the stresses of operation. Typically the bolt itself and gas key, like I said, will be made from a different steel. But the important thing is to make sure that they're not skimping on materials. Okay, you can also get titanium bolt carriers, which is not a bad option if you're willing to fork over the extra cash, but it's not at all necessary. In fact, I've never really used a titanium bolt carrier, so I can't exactly vouch for it. I assume it's pretty good. It does raise a question in my mind as to what kind of finishes you can get on titanium in a bolt carrier group. But yeah, I honestly, if you find a Carpenter 158 bolt carrier and then look into the rest of the components, just make sure that bolt steel and the gas key are made of quality steel as well. You should be okay. I'm not going to go into the steels that you should completely avoid. Just know that if the company doesn't tell you what their group parts are made out of, then that's a red flag, okay? A lot of times they'll just say a generic term for a good quality steel, and they're like, our bolt carrier group is made out of this steel. And it's like, well, I'm 99% sure that every single part in that bolt carrier group is not made of the same steel. So it's a little bit of a red flag. Next, I would say you need to look at what type of coating or finish that they're putting on all their BCG parts. The three most common finishes that you'll find are manganese phosphate, which is actually Parkerization, black nitride, and nickel boron. Okay, there is some debate in the community whether nickel boron is actually nickel boron or some other cheaper process, as apparently, allegedly, the original process is patented and only one company can do it. I can't confirm or deny that. I have heard many people say that if it's not from company X, and that's not an actual brand, that's just a generic term, if it's not from this company, then it's not actually nickel boron. I can't confirm that, okay? It's not my desire to confirm that and dig through patents and figure out who's got what. Just know that these are the three most common, okay? Despite the fact that Parkerization is actually the cheapest, generally, finish type, I actually prefer it, but for some good reasons. Parkerization is a very porous coating that actually absorbs lubricant and retains that lubricant. So it soaks in lubricant and retains that to help with lubricity. And it's also a very tough coating. That's why you see a lot of American World War II firearms in their original Parkerization still intact, because it's a tough coating. It's very durable. Nickel boron is attractive to a lot of people because it's very slick, it's shiny, it's corrosion resistant. And this leads to the idea that you don't need to clean that bolt carrier group, because they think, well, it doesn't need, a lot of people think you don't need to add lube because it's already a slick metal or a slick finish, and a lot of people will stop cleaning it. Now, I will confirm one thing. It's actually easier to clean a nickel boron bolt carrier group because it really just wipes away. And until you get some really hard baked on, built up carbon deposits, general carbon is pretty easy to wipe off of nickel boron bolt carrier groups. I've also heard a lot of people, and I'm talking about big people in the industry, who have been saying you should avoid nickel boron bolt carrier groups for whatever reason. I tend to stay out of the argument because I don't really care that much, because I like Parkerization. It's a simple, cheap finish, and it does its job well. That's all that really matters. It's tough, and it absorbs lubricant, which is very good. The third finish is black nitride, which is a treatment that actually hardens the steel. And it's also generally regarded as increasing corrosion resistance and durability. But out of the three, I would go manganese phosphates, Parkerization. Then I would go with black nitride. Third, maybe nickel boron. I probably won't buy any anytime soon. I would need to see a lot of long-term data on the widespread usage of nickel boron in bolt carrier groups before I would trust it and bet my life to it and make sure that this thing's running 100% all the time. The next thing I would check with bolt carrier groups. So all we've been over so far is the steel and the finish. I want to also make sure that whatever brand you're buying from actually advertises that their bolt carrier groups are MPI tested, which is short for magnetic particle inspected, and high pressure tested. These are just standardized tests that help ensure quality control, reliability, as well as testing that these parts can actually meet the standards they need to meet, right? So this is not something special. If someone says, oh, it's MPI tested, well, that shouldn't move it up on your list. It should leave it as a possibility, because everyone who's making these bolt carrier groups should be MPI testing and high pressure testing. This is a standard. When you're making a product, you have to do standardized testing to keep quality control, okay? Next thing I would look for is staked gas key screws or bolts, whatever you actually want to call them. It doesn't matter. The threaded knobs, they're not knobs. They're not. They're really screws. The threaded screws that hold your gas key to your bolt carrier group, those should be staked into position, because they can come loose. And if your gas key comes loose, trust me, you're going to have some serious problems seriously quick. The last thing I would check for on a bolt carrier group is I would visually inspect all the parts of the bolt carrier group for any burrs or damaged parts, because manufactured parts can occasionally come out of the factory with issues. Even if that company puts a lot of effort into quality control, it's happened. It's modern production. Stuff happens, okay? So if it's possible for you to take it, if you're like in a in-person store and they will let you take the bolt carrier group out of the box and look at it, that is great. You don't want to buy a lemon because, hopefully the place you buy it from would let you return it and get a better one, but you just want to avoid any problems before you run into them, rather than addressing problems along the way that you run into. So that was some very general stuff with the bolt carrier groups. You can get more specific. You can look at locking lug surfaces, which is also very important. Those locking lugs are what really mate your bolt to your barrel, okay? And a lot of companies are moving to extremely rounded locking lugs, not lubs, that supposedly assist in the smoothness of going into battery. I can't confirm that. I have not ever dropped the money on a barrel and a bolt carrier group that are meant to go together with those kind of locking lugs. It's very interesting. And we see similar ideas on some bolt action rifles with their locking lugs, but most of the time they're squared off. Something to think about if you're looking to get into more detail and really fine tune these things. You can look at some high end bolt carrier groups. Just understand that, make sure you're not getting taken for a ride for money. Okay. The next, I guess the second half or the second heart I would talk about is the barrel. So what do we look for in a good quality barrel? And there are so many types of steel that we see used for barrels, but we're only going to talk about a few today due to time constraints. Because like I said, I thought this was going to be a quick episode. Then I realized it's going to be a little more in detail than I anticipated. First, we're going to talk about chrome Molle steels, such as 4150 chrome Molle. And if a steel type starts with a 41, right? What that means is it's a chrome Molle steel, which is a blend of chromium and I don't know how to say this word, so molybdenum. There's a B in between the Y and the D. It's kind of weird, but it's a blend between chromium and the Molle stuff. And the 50 after the 41 means that it has a 0.50% carbon content. So in short, these steels are a heavily mixed, almost like an alloy. It's a mixture of different metals that change the properties of the steel, right? Most steel, honestly, is a big mixture nowadays. You rarely see any steel that's only like one or two things, right? Chrome Molle steels are meant to be hard and tough. And that's something that chromium does, by the way. Chromium is supposed to toughen up steels. I'm not a bladesmith. I'm not a blacksmith. And I'm not the biggest big brain person on metallurgy. I know a little bit about knife steels, right? And I know a little bit about common barrel steels, okay? I am a machinist, and I do know a couple things about some cold-rolled steels. I love Carpenter 158. It's amazing to machine on, and it's a fantastic steel. But if you're looking for a really in-depth, deep understanding of what these different steel types mean and the mixtures of metals that are used to create them, I don't think chromium actually is what hardens it. I could be wrong. I'm maybe thinking of cobalt in some other steel mixtures. So, see what I'm saying? Like, there are a lot of elements that are used in these things, and it can get confusing. So I would go look at there are some, off the top of my head, there are, I think Blade HQ, I know it's a knife company, but they actually have a pretty in-depth, page on their website that talks about steel types and what changes properties of steel. I'm sure you can find the information elsewhere, but that's the first thing that popped in my head was when I was back in the day, I was reading up about blade steel, right? But this is kind of a roundabout way of saying that yes, chrome Molle steels are made to be hard and tough, but that doesn't apply to all chrome Molle steels because some are crap. And you'll notice that with a lot of things that say chrome Molle, but they are not tough or hard. You'll see I've seen knives that say chrome Molle the knives themselves are garbage. They snap like a twig, or they don't, I know I'm approaching barrels that are meant for shooting, which is a completely different purpose than blades. And I'm not trying to mix those up. Let me stop and slow down for a second. Just because something is labeled as X does not mean it meets the quality of a couple of the things that may fall in that category, right? 4150, 4140, these are good chrome Molle steels used for barrels. They're both good, okay? They're very good. But that doesn't mean every chrome Molle steel that is made is great for barrels. So I'm trying to show that, you can find a knife that may say it's X type of steel, but it's a cheap knockoff of it or a cheap version of it. You know what I'm saying? So I would look for the company advertising exactly what type of chrome Molle it is. So anytime a company doesn't include the actual type of steel or the actual type of materials they're using to make things, it's a red flag for me. Because if they're proud of the quality components they're using, they would advertise that. If they're not advertising the quality of their components, then there's a reason for it. Okay? You don't hide a bragging right. You know what I mean? If you're trying to pull in customers and you're trying to get more people to buy your thing, if you're not advertising the material used, there's a really good reason. It's because you're not proud of that material. So if they say chrome moly and they don't clarify, maybe just back off for a minute, do some research, and maybe look at other companies if it's possible for you. It's not always possible to window shop, but I'm saying if you can, I would take the chance. So keep your eyes out for those those red flags, those deceptive marketing techniques, because companies will use deceptive marketing techniques to get one over on you if they can. So there's also stainless steels. So to back up real quick, of those chrome mollies, 4150, 4140, I would not hesitate at those two. They're both good steels. There are also stainless steels that are used on a regular basis for rifle barrels. And here we get into another almost identical situation where you want the advertiser to advertise which stainless steel they're using. Okay? Not all stainless steels are made equally. Remember, you can get a $15 gas station knife that says it's made out of stainless steel. Doesn't mean it's good, right? A very common and decent stainless steel that is used for rifle barrels, especially AR-15 barrels that are in the higher end, is 416 SS, which is just 416 stainless steel. This stuff is specifically very hard, but supposedly not the best for accuracy and long-term longevity with a high round count. So this is one of those things you take into account. What am I going to do with this rifle? Am I going to shoot it once a month? Maybe. Then maybe 416 SS works for you because you're not going to go through those high round counts and you're not looking for pinpoint accuracy or to actually min-max. And when I say min-max, I'm talking about, minimizing any potential issues and maximizing efficiency and outcome, right? You're taking every % you can get to help you out on this build. Another stainless steel is 416R, which is a steel that was it was designed specifically for use in barrels, which is interesting, right? So a lot of times a steel will come out and then different companies and industries will see how that steel or that material will react in their industry. How well does it do? 416R was specifically made for barrels. And it's got really good longevity and quality, okay? I would recommend 416R. If you're looking for a stainless steel barrel, I would recommend 416R for a rifle that's going to be very, it's going to be shot a lot. It's going to need to be reliable. It's going to need to reduce wear as long as possible, right? 416R is very good for this. You'll also see, well, let me back up. The standardized barrels that were used by the military for the Colt M4 rifles and a couple other platforms, and I believe possibly, I have to look this up again, but I believe 240 Bravos and 249s was CMV, Chrome Moly Vanadium. I want to say Vanadium for some reason. Vanadium, okay? This stuff, CMV is how it's labeled typically. I know the Colt rifles used CMV barrels. I can't remember if the FN machine guns did, and I can no longer currently confirm if the modern military rifle barrels are still CMV. And they probably are. The military is very slow to change their standardization, so maybe. But this is chrome moly with vanadium added for high temp durability. So if you see a 41V50, kind of like 4150 chrome moly, this is 41V50. This or if it's marked CMV, that means that barrel is a mil-spec barrel material, and this steel is really well suited for high rate of fire firearms, such as the machine guns, right? So if you see CMV on a barrel, this thing is probably just made to mil-spec standards, which you can find online, by the way. I forget the actual standardization number sequence because it's like, some enigma to figure out, but you can look up, the military mil spec standardizations and specifications. So CMV was another decent barrel steel, and it's also another one to look at as a possible barrel steel to use for a rifle if you're going to be doing a high round count. I would take 416R over CMV, just personally, but once again, that's my personal opinion. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not telling you what you should buy, because this is not a build guide, guys. This is just advice on how to find quality components, right? What to look for. Because sometimes you can't afford the best quality across the entire board. Sometimes you want to, buy some good parts here and skimp out over here if you can to save some money. I get it. If you're looking for another, I know I shouted out Blade HQ earlier for some definitions on like blade steel, it is blade steel for them, by the way, but they do have some explanations as to how the different steel types and components change how the steel works. 80-lower.com, their blog has a really in-depth article on barrel steels. If you're looking for a little more detail on specifically barrel steels and you want to fine-tune your decision, I go to 80-lower.com and go to their blog. You may be able to wow, I'm struggling. You may be able to just search barrel steel. If I keep saying blade steel on accident, guys, I have gotten in my own head with the blade steel thing. I am meaning barrel steel when we're talking about barrels. They have an article on their blog about the different barrel steels. I would check that out. It's actually a pretty good read if you are new to this and are looking to learn. The exterior finishes for barrels, we're moving on, by the way, from steel. We're no longer talking about the barrel steel. The exterior finishes are generally the same options as bolt carriers. So everything I said earlier about, phosphate manganese, I think is what I said earlier. I always want to say just parkerization. It's manganese phosphate. I got it backwards. I like to say parkerization. Black nitride. I don't really see nickel boron finished barrels, obviously. But so you'll get stainless steel raw barrels. You'll see black nitride. You'll see parkerized barrels. You'll see Cerakoted barrels. Okay, doesn't really matter. Completely up to you. It's the exterior of the barrel. Whatever you trust to keep rust off your barrel. That's about it. Cerakote does have pretty high temp, a new high temp Cerakote. That's good for suppressors and barrels. Just an FYI, if you're looking into that. Internally, though, we see a little more to look at. There's only two options, but they're more important than the exterior. And the two options are chrome lining or bare steel, right? So with chrome lining, you get the added corrosion resistance, right? And a higher round count before you start to get significant wear internally. But a slight loss in accuracy, because to do a chrome lining, the barrel itself and the rifling internally in the bore of the barrel has to be oversized, because chrome lining actually adds dimensions. It's not a finish, it's more of a coating, right? Finishes like bluing, for example, like specifically bluing metal, you don't actually add any thickness or any dimensions to the metal. You're changing the surface finish through a chemical reaction. Chrome lining has to actually add material. So they have to oversize these bores to be in spec when the chrome lining's done. So I hear it's a slight loss in accuracy. I think some places say anywhere from like a quarter of an MOA to half an MOA. That's going to come down to an individual basis, the ability of the shooter, how are you testing. But just know that there's a slight loss in accuracy, which is generally understood to come from chrome lining. And for this one, I will leave it completely up to you, the buyer/builder, because it just comes down to personal preference. Rifle powder has come a long way in the past few decades, and it isn't as abrasive as it used to be, especially compared to the powders that were used in the early Vietnam War era M16s, which is what brought along the military standardizing chrome lining in the first place. There was issues with powders which were causing fouling and all these different things, and corrosion. in combination with, the Vietnam landscape. So real quick, for more information on the early Vietnam War M16s, go to our second episode on U.S. military service rifles if you're looking for a little more history on that one. But rifle powders have come a long way. I wouldn't say that you absolutely need a chrome-lined barrel anymore, okay? If it's my personal preference, I'm actually not really caring about the internal, lined or bare steel. And the reason is because if the rest of the barrel meets my standards for length and barrel steel and the stuff we're about to get to here in a second, like gas port location, gas port diameter, the stuff we're about to get to, if it meets everything but it's chrome lined, I don't care. Like, I don't care. That's not going to make or break the rifle for me, right? In fact, I may lose a little accuracy, but at least I get a little more long-term longevity out of that barrel. So it's a trade-off. If you're looking for precision, maybe you don't want the chrome lining. If you're looking for just reliability and a duty rifle, maybe the bare steel. It doesn't matter either way, though. Or maybe you want the chrome lined, not the bare steel. Sorry. I'm talking too fast, right? If you're looking for precision, maybe not chrome lining. If you're looking for longevity and durability and high round count, maybe the chrome line, right? But it's not that important anymore, in my opinion, unless you're shooting some absolute garbage ammo. So the next thing we're going to get to is actually more important than the internal finish, and that would be the gas port. And not only the size of the gas port, but also the distance, such as carbine length or mid-length, which refers to how far down the barrel the gas port is actually located. When it comes to the size of your gas port, this affects your overall reliability as well as your recoil impulse. And if you don't know, gas goes from this hole in your barrel, not the main hole, not the bore where the bullet comes out. There is a hole that goes vertically through the top of your barrel on an AR-15, and a gas block sits on that, receives the gas from that hole, and redirects it rearward, into the gas key of your bolt carrier group, which has an expansion chamber and which pushes the bolt carrier group back, cycling the rifle, etc., etc. But this is the gas system. It all starts with that hole in the barrel to redirect gas to your gas system. A lot of common AR-15s come with over-gassed gas systems, which means the gas port in the barrel is wider than it needs to be. Specifically, they do this to allow it to keep running as more and more carbon builds up, possibly restricting the gas port hole. But this causes more gas than needed to travel rearward into your bolt. And this since you don't need as much of that gas as you're getting, this results in a harsher recoil impulse, right? So it's a little bit of a trade-off. You're getting potentially... Well, let me back up. I want to be clear about this because some people might get upset about this one. Having an overgassed rifle is not necessarily a bad thing. This is trying to ensure that your rifle has the potential to fire a higher round count before the carbon starts to affect the function when it comes to the gas port and gas block. Okay? If I were you, I would find the public Google document that has tons of companies' barrels, their lengths, the gas port diameters. Okay? This is really, really cool, and it's free. It has everything categorized by company, barrel length, gas port size. Okay? If you can, download it or save it. I would keep it because you can use this as a shorthand to look at companies. What are they doing with their barrels? What are they doing with their gas ports? Whenever I buy a new barrel, I base everything off of Sons of Liberty gas port sizes. Okay? This is not because I'm a Sons of Liberty Gunworks fanboy. In fact, I don't have a Sons of Liberty Gunworks rifle. I wish I did, but I don't have one. I wouldn't mind having a nice rifle like that. But the reason I base things off of their barrel is because Sons of Liberty Gunworks does extensive testing and seems to have really dialed in what diameter the gas port should be to reliably function with particular barrel lengths. This is good information, right? So you'll see tons of companies on there, but I would pay extra attention to Sons of Liberty Gunworks barrel gas port diameter. and specifically with, the barrel length as the relation. So if you're thinking about buying a 12.5 inch barrel, I would go look at all of Sons of Liberty Gunworks 12.5 inch barrels, and then look at the gas port diameters they're using for those barrels. And then once you have that number, it doesn't mean you have to buy Sons of Liberty Gunworks. You can buy other companies, but you're using this as a baseline, right? I think it's a good practice. Like I said, you don't have to go with their barrels. I wouldn't. Hey, if you go with their barrels, you're not going wrong. But like I said, use their barrels as a reference point so you don't go wrong. But you also can go with overgassed barrels or overgassed gas port / rifles. And you can take that reliability over the fine tuning of the recoil impulse to reliability. But you really do not want an undersized gas port because your reliability will go out the door. Not enough gas will get into the gas system. It won't be able to cycle. You'll start short stroking. It's a bad time. Bad time. I've seen it many times, and I've seen plenty of people have to drill out the gas port because they weren't getting enough gas. Okay? Something to think about. All right, so now you're looking at barrel length, right? That's gonna depend on what role you want your AR-15 or AR platform to fill. Is it a sub 100 yard only gun? Is it a designated marksman rifle? Is it a general purpose duty rifle? Basing your build off of what role you want to fill is what you need to do, because just like planes, tanks, cars, there is no one size fits all rifle. The Sherman was not a one size fits all tank. The F-22 Raptor is not a one size fits all plane. It is what it is. I'm sorry. I know you think you have a rifle that can work in CQB and shoot 1,500 meters. It's not happening. Okay. So just be wise and just start to be smart with what you're building. If you want to build a specific purpose rifle where it's going to fill one role, then build it accordingly. Now, when I say general purpose rifle, I mean typically a duty rifle that you would bet your life on if you had to, but it's not meant to do anything in particular extremely well besides run reliably. It's not a 20-inch designated marksman rifle where it's taken quarter MOA shots at 500 yards. It's also not a super duper short CQB gun that won't ever take a shot past 100 yards. A general purpose rifle, I think, should be able to work well and extremely reliably between 0 and 300 meters. Okay, this is a general purpose rifle. This can do most things well, but does not exclusively excel at any one thing besides reliability. Your duty rifle should be extremely reliable. That's priority with that. And I typically consider this to be between a 12.5 to 16-inch barrel. That's my usual thought process for a general purpose rifle. I would put 10.5 more towards the CQB range, but 12.5 to 16 inches is generally what I think of when I think of general purpose rifle. So we're building the rifle based on, the role we want to fill. You can get pencil barrels that save weight by, let me back up. We talked about barrel length, filling the role. The other thing is barrel profile also needs to be based on what role you're filling, okay? You have pencil barrels. Like I said, I skipped ahead a little bit on my outline. You have pencil barrels that save weight by making the barrels as thin as possible, or you can get, I should actually explain that with pencil barrels, you are saving a lot of weight, and this could be good if you don't need to sustain a prolonged shooting session or engagement, but accuracy will be less than thicker barrels, and if it gets way too hot in a prolonged shooting session or shooting engagement, you will have quicker barrel droop than if you had thicker barrels, and it will get hot much faster. So that's one thing to think about. You can have straight wall or straight taper barrels, which are made for higher accuracy. And they're not exactly straight all the way down like a bolt action barrel because they have to have a step typically for the gas block, but they're generally very, very thick, and they might step down once for the gas block, and then they're very, very thick until the threads or until the bare muzzle, whatever. These thick barrels are, like bull barrels and straight taper barrels. These are made for greater accuracy. They're very thick, but they obviously weigh a lot more, right? So if you're not going to be moving a lot, if you're in a static position, maybe in a DMR roll, maybe the thicker barrel that's longer, maybe an 18-inch bull barrel, works for you better because you don't need to move that rifle 300 yards at a time, right? Just depends on what you're building, guys. You're thinking about the role that you want. Oh, I'm sorry, I hit the mic. Think about the role that you want this rifle to fill. Now we're going to go into other barrel profiles. I specifically do not like government profile barrels because the M4 government profile barrels were specifically made to allow the mounting of M203 grenade launchers and not for any performance reasons. So people think because it's used by the military, it must be a superior profile with everything figured out. But that's not the case at all. In fact, it's got dimensions I don't like being thinner right in front of the chamber and thicker after the gas block, minus that weird step they have for the grenade launcher. So I would actually swap that, right? I don't mind if the muzzle side, it tends to be a little thinner, but I want a good bit of rigidity and strength right in front of that chamber. So that's why for a general purpose rifle, my favorite profile is the SOCOM profile, which swaps the dimensions, right? So instead of being thinner right in front of the chamber and then getting really thick again, minus in the M4's case, minus that step for the grenade launcher, I think the M16 government profiles didn't have that step. But the SOCOM profile swaps those dimensions. You get a thicker area in front of the chamber and thinner past the gas port or gas block. That's my personal general purpose favorite profile. For DMR rifles, like I said, you may want a longer, heavier barrel. So like the HBAR, HBAR, it's a very, very thick barrel. And then for like a bug out rifle or a limited engagement rifle where you may want a short pencil barrel, since you're not looking for, you're not looking to use it as a duty rifle, you're looking at it as a last resort, but a rifle that lets you be very mobile, and lightweight. So if you need a rifle that you have to use in a last ditch effort, the pencil barrels and the lightweight builds tend to come into more of that aspect in my mind, right? All right, so we're almost done with barrels. The last aspect of barrels that we need to go over is the twist rate. The twist rate of the rifling is directly related to what weight bullets you'll be shooting. If you're strictly firing 55 grain 223 or 5.56 and nothing else, then a 1 in 10 barrel twist will suit you just fine. If you're strictly shooting precision, like 70 grain all the way up to 77 grain, 5.56 or 223, then a 1 in 7 twist is more desirable. The heavier the projectile you're shooting, the faster the twist rate you'll actually need to stabilize that projectile. And when I say faster, I mean, a 1 in 10 means that rifling makes a full twist, a full rotation every 10 inches. It's a slow twist. 1 in 7 makes a full rotation every 7 inches. So it's a much faster twist. The heavier the bullet, the faster the twist you need to stabilize it properly. If you're shooting 62 grain, like I do, I like to keep a lot of green tip lying around. And I typically zero my general purpose rifles for 62 grain. Since I do that, I prefer a 1 in 8 twist. It gives me a little looseness where I can shoot maybe some 70 grains every once in a while if I want to. But it does really well for the 62 grain. There's a lot of debate on that, guys. I hear a lot of people saying 1 in 7 is better for 62 grain. I disagree. That's just me. Once again, do your own research. I encourage you to not take my word as gospel. Go do your own research and make sure you're thinking about what you're building. Okay. Just don't, if you buy a 1 in 7 twist rate barrel and all you shoot is 55 grain, you're going to see some weird accuracy. Okay. That's a really fast twist rate for a very light bullet. It just is what it is. All right. We are done with barrels and we're done with BCGs. So now that we've gotten the two most important components, in my opinion, out of the way, we can start to move in a little faster into upper and lower receivers. That's what holds everything together. You can go to both extremes, either uber budget or really, you can really splurge and get a match grade set of billet receivers. This is another aspect that can come down to personal preference, since a lot of companies actually use the same manufacturer but they mark them for the different companies that are selling them. That's actually a hot topic. People are like, I only go by this company, or I only go by this company. And in reality, those two companies are made by the same manufacturer. It's interesting. The biggest thing to look for, when it comes to upper and lower receivers, make sure they're using good quality materials. Okay, it's the same thing we talked about earlier. Typically aluminum, billet aluminum or forged. I haven't used forged in a while. But either way, like, you're looking for quality, right? Like, you're looking for you want them to advertise what they're using and make sure that it's good quality material. Okay. I think the most common, right now, is 7075 aluminum. I'm actually going to triple check that real quick because I don't want to lie to you guys. I want to make sure it's 7075 aluminum. I'm pretty sure that's the most common one. Give me 1 second. I don't want to. I mean, I've seen 7076 as well. Oh no, I'm thinking of 7075 T6. My bad. So the 7075 T6, it's good. Okay, I really like 7075 aluminum. I would typically stay away from. There's another one. I think it's like 6061. I think I prefer 7075. If you see 7075 T6 aluminum, you're good. It's a good quality material for making receivers. You can absolutely mix and match a lot of upper and receiver brands together, upper and lower receiver brands together, since general specifications with AR-15s and their tolerances are standardized across the market, like we brought up earlier. You can get a more expensive billet sets, the sets which tend to fit together like a glove, and they have like weight-saving cuts, and they're just generally like more visually appealing. Like I think Spike's Tactical still sells billet sets. Noveski, I think, still sells billet sets. Radian as well, I believe. You can splurge. Like, you can make these things. You can get these things really nice. They're beautiful, but don't feel bad if you need to go with a slightly cheaper non-billet upper and lower receiver. Just pay attention to the quality of the material. If they're not advertising the actual material itself, another red flag. Maybe stay away. Okay. I've seen plenty of Anderson upper and lower receiver sets run like a champ. I'm sorry. Like, I wouldn't go with a full Anderson build maybe, but upper and lower that's full of really good parts. As long as those things are in spec, the rifle will run. I will comment while we're on receivers, because we're not going to go over this specific part later. I want to comment on the castle nut, which is one of the components that keeps the buffer, the buffer tube from backing out. Make sure that the castle nut, make sure the castle nut is staked in place once it's installed. That way it doesn't cause issues on the road. If you're buying a rifle and it's not staked, if you still want to buy the rifle, that's fine. Just make sure you stake that castle nut. If you are building the rifle, make sure you or someone you trust stakes that castle nut once you got everything installed. All right, moving along past the receivers. Gas blocks. They're very important and can sometimes be a little confusing. Since there are many barrel profiles, there are also many different gas block inner diameters to fit these different profiles. So make sure you're getting a gas block that will actually fit the barrel profile that you're putting it on. Okay? And this is usually done in a decimal point. So like 0.750 or 0.81 or something like that, right? Like, whatever the diameter of your barrel is at the gas port is the inner diameter of the gas block you need to put on it. Okay. I would recommend not skimping on this component if you can. I would recommend this be one of the components, just like the barrel and the BCG, that you take seriously and don't skimp on, because it's a very crucial part. You can have a gas block that is made out of sub-quality materials. Once it gets hot and all that pressure from the gas gets to it, it could crack, and that's not what you want. When it comes to how these things are mounted, you can have gas blocks that are held in place by set screws. You can have a gas block that is pinned to the barrel via a roll pin that goes through the lower portion of the barrel itself and the gas block. Or you can get both, where it's set screwed in and pinned. I prefer both. Now, I want to back up and say, if you're going to just do a set screw gas block, that's fine. Just make sure the barrel is dimpled or has dimples. If it doesn't come with dimples, get a gunsmith you trust to actually put some in there for you. Those set screws can back off. Having them in a dimpled section of the barrel helps those set screws stay in there. Also, remember your Loctite. If it's a permanent gas block that you're never going to take off again, and you're sure about that, like 110% sure, red Loctite may not be a bad idea. I prefer gas blocks that are both pinned and set screwed on for reliability. They're less likely to come off. Set screws back out, pins can get deformed. So the combination of the two has, I've yet to see a properly installed gas block that has both the set screws and the pin properly installed. I've yet to see one of those come off on its own. I've seen plenty of set screw gas blocks come off on their own after shooting, especially from the factory. For some reason, certain companies I will not name don't like to tighten their set screws on their gas blocks properly. Just something out there. If I was going to recommend one gas block that I think is a decent purchase for the money, I would say Geisley's low-profile super gas block. It's tough, it's reliable, and it has that, what they call their bomb-proof installation, which is just like, anyone else who does a set screw and a pinning. It's pretty good. I recommend theirs. It's a tough gas block. You're probably not going to regret that. And no, I am not sponsored, although I would take a Geisley gas block sponsorship, maybe just not the rest of their stuff. Not saying the rest of their stuff isn't good, it's just some of their things are a little overpriced for my taste. But the gas blocks, I highly recommend. Triggers. This is another section of personal preference coming into play, okay? I know I'm talking really fast, guys, but I'm trying to move through this as fast as I can so we don't run way over time. Triggers is personal preference, guys. The cheapest triggers you're going to find tend to be mil-spec triggers, which have an average break of around 6.5 pounds. And you can get very proficient with these triggers, these mil-spec triggers, just like a lot of trainers and instructors and shooters get really proficient at standard stock Glock triggers, okay? You can get single-stage triggers, which have a very, supposed to be a smooth, consistent pull with no tactile wall that you can feel. It just pulls until it breaks. And then you can have two-stage triggers, which have a very tactile wall that you will feel. You'll stop at that wall. Not a hard stop. There's just a noticeable wall, and then typically a lighter pull after that to make the final break. If it was me, once again, just my opinion, my explanation of my thought process. For precision rifles, I actually prefer two-stage triggers. And this is just me. I know plenty of guys that completely swap this and they disagree with it. For precision rifles, I prefer a two-stage because I can prep the trigger to the wall. Once I've prepped it, I'm at the wall and I'm sure I'm taking my shot. I have reconfirmed and I'm comfortable with this shot. Then I can make that last little push past the wall and break the shot. That's my personal preference. For duty rifles, I'm not looking for uber precision. So a consistent pull that just pulls straight back every time and is consistent is fine with me. So single stage for my general purpose rifles, two stage for my precision rifles. That's once again just me. I know a lot of guys that hate two stage in general. I know guys that prefer two stage for their general purpose rifles. It's all personal preference. Just gave you my opinion. You can also get triggers. They typically come in two fashions. They come in a drop-in where it's just a box that holds everything. You knock your trigger out. You put the new one in there with the box and you just put the new pins in. You're done. Simple. Or you can get the kits that come in like a baggie with parts, and it's still very low effort to get it installed. It's not hard. A quick 30-second YouTube video will teach you everything you need to know about installing an AR trigger. I just want to make sure and say that you guys just make sure you're buying from a company that's reputable. Go down to personal preference and get what type of trigger you want. But if the trigger is $20, it's probably a red flag. Okay, I'd probably stay away from $20 triggers. You're looking at usually from the mil-spec range all the way up to like $300. You can get $300 AR triggers if you want. I see a lot of really, really good triggers at the $150 mark. Okay, you can do a lot with a $150 trigger on both ends. Single stage, two stage, whatever. You don't need to spend $300 and you don't need to spend $40. But you can. I've seen mil-spec triggers for like $50 to $60. I'd be wary of like $30 ones. That's just me. Saying mil-spec in the civilian market, no one's really going to knock you for bending the truth a little bit when it comes to like a quote-unquote mil-spec trigger. So just be safe. Make sure you're buying from reputable companies and not just taking the cheapest things you can find. And I think we're at the point now where the rest of everything we're going to talk about, which is not that much, but the rest of the parts generally, this is like a final group, and I just labeled it accessories, right? Because handguards, muzzle devices, pistol grips, optics, stocks, controls, lights, lasers, etc., etc. These all come down to personal preference. Do you like a rubberized pistol grip or a straight polymer one? Do you like a vertical grip? Do you like an ambidextrous safety? Do you like an ambidextrous mag release? Do you want a basic bare bones stock or a super high PRS stock? This all comes down to personal preference, right? We've got a rifle that should function properly with all the parts we've talked about. It should be reliable. This is just now down to accessorizing and making sure that this thing's comfortable for you and works for you and your purposes. I would say that you really shouldn't throw a $20 handguard on your rifle because you're going to see drooping, you're going to see breakages, or the top rail on top of the handguard may not line up with the top rail on your receiver. If I'm going to recommend anything when it comes to handguards, I would say I recommend M-LOK simply because it's very easy to find attachments for M-LOK. Keymod has fallen by the wayside because M-LOK really won the market war between who's going to use it. Or you can go with just a typical old school 4-way Picatinny rail handguard if you like. Those tend to shred your hands a little bit though over long shooting sessions. But other than that, guys, it's really down to personal preference. You can do hybrid, of budget and quality, mid-grade stuff and cheap grade stuff and really expensive stuff. But I would say, if you can afford to build a rifle and you're looking to make it a one-stop rifle where this is your general purpose duty rifle that you're going to bet your life on at any point in time, and this is the only AR-15 you're going to buy, I would say stay away from the cheap stuff. At least try to go for the mid-grade, right? You don't need to go Gucci. A lot of Gucci ARs out there. They're nice. They're cool. But you don't need to go Gucci, okay? Remember, the Colt M4s have been used in the military for a long time, and those things kind of suck. Just saying. A lot of rounds fired through them, and they're wore out, and they still use them. Now, I'm not saying you should have a wore the slap out rifle to bet your life on. I'm just saying you don't need to go to a $3,000 AR. You can go buy a Radian built by hand and custom ordered. You can go buy a $3,000 rifle if you want to. If you want to build one, or if you just want to buy one, that's going to be something you can bet your life to. Look at all the different parts we talked about today. Look at the materials used. Look at the quality control. Look at reviews. Look at are they advertising all these different materials they use? And if they don't, call them. Maybe they just don't feel like putting it on their website because it takes up space on their page. Call them. Ask them the materials, right? If they don't want to tell you, then another red flag, right? I would say, if you're building this as your only AR or the AR that you have to build, to bet your life on, it might be worth it to save up a little longer and ensure you're buying the quality parts over the really cheap parts. That's just me. Do your thing. It's your money. It's your life. It's your weapon. Just putting my advice as a gunsmith out there who sees lots of ARs come through with all kinds of issues. If you don't believe me about ARs having common issues, go look at School of the American Rifles YouTube channel and go look at him do autopsies on all kinds of brands of AR-15s. There are all kinds of stuff out there that can go wrong. I'm just giving you the tools or some of the tools that may help you build a reliable rifle. Hopefully this episode will actually prove helpful if you're looking to purchase or build your own AR-15. I really want to prioritize reliability over everything else. If you're like me, don't get pulled into companies or parts that prioritize form over function. Okay, I prefer function over form. I may one day do an episode or maybe a video or a vlog or whatever, I don't know, of the next rifle that I'm building. If I do, I'm going to break down every decision I made along the way to help visualize not only the thought process, but also the end result of being meticulous and particular with every decision of the build. If you want to hear about that or you want to see about that, let me know. Comments or messages, whatever. Let us know if you want to see something in particular. Make sure to find us on social media. We're done, by the way, guys. We're done. That wasn't too bad. Right around an hour, okay? Make sure to find us on social media. Instagram, Facebook, our own website, right? TBR Gunworks on all three of those. It's TBR Gunworks. Remember to, if you liked the episode, if you think this was helpful, or if you want to help the channel out, leave a review on whatever podcast site you're actually using. I lost track of which ones will actually let you review at this point. It gets complicated. We just know we hate Pandora because they hate guns. So help us out if you liked it. If you liked it and think we have value, think that we're putting out some good information, give us a review or subscribe on YouTube and go look at some of our other videos. If this is the first one, our other videos or audio episodes on podcasts, obviously. Go look at some other ones. We have some history episodes. We have some technical episodes. We have gunsmith guests. We're doing everything we can to put out episodes on a reliable schedule for you guys. We're trying every 2 weeks right now. If it gets to the point where we can actually go back to once a week, we will. If that's not possible, we're going to do our best to stick to the every 2 weeks. So that's all for me, guys. I talk so fast, but I feel like I got everything out there that I needed to get out there. It was good. It was good. Make sure you guys remember that every gun law is an infringement. Take care, and I'll see you next time.